I've been doing Python for probably 6 years now. And I actually learned Python just to get into Django because I've been doing web development for probably about 15 years now. Started in PHP, and I've also done Perl, some .NET technologies. But once I got to Python, I kind of switched careers and found the jobs where I could do Django full-time. Recently just started working at with the Uplink team at Verizon, for those of you who are familiar with them. I've been there about a month. They don't use Django, they use Bottle. So it's kind of a new thing for me, but a lot simpler. But I still like Django. I use it in my personal projects, so that's kind of it about me. This talk is kind of short. I put something out there on the user group a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago, saying here's some ideas that I could present when we were looking for presenters, and I had some feedback that people wanted to see the new migration system, so I decided to give me a good chance to learn it myself. Are we ready to go with Hangout? Or you? Okay. So this is kind of the background of how migrations became a part of the common, or the core of Django. Andrew Godwin is the person who created South. How many of here are familiar with South? Okay. So he joined the Django core team, and he created this Kickstarter project trying to earn 2,500 pounds to put, to encourage him to do this personal project and take some time off from work to rewrite migrations and build it into Django. And within just over an hour, he met his funding goal, and he ended up getting funded 18,000 pounds to do this. And his goal, you see this project, it was started on April 6th, 2013. I think he had some lofty goals, but we're just now seeing it just about done. So I've heard people say I can't use Django because it doesn't have migrations. No longer an excuse. So to learn migrations, I decided to create a new project. I've had something on my mind that I wanted to build for a while. I've got all these different places where I buy movies. I might get them on DVD, I might buy them on Amazon Prime, iTunes, Plex. They're kind of everywhere. So my wife keeps renting movies that we already own. I'm like, that's on Plex. And she's like, I don't know where you keep all your movies. So I thought, well, I'll just build a tool where she can see where I keep all my movies. So that's kind of the background of this app that I started creating to do migrations here. And I registered the domain, Where's My Video? There's nothing there yet, but it'll be coming soon. All right, so I started simple. This was my first model that I made for it. I basically just wanted to create a movie and have a title, and I'm hooking into the moviedatabase.org, where they've got a free API where you can, it's kind of like IMDb, but it's free, more open. And so here's my model. Pretty basic. So here's my very first try. I read that all you have to do now is type make migrations, and it will detect changes. So I tried that, and nothing happened. No changes detected. So I said, well, what happens if I migrate? So I typed migrate, and it basically created my table and applied my new model. And so basically, migrate is like your syncdb command. You can use either or. So then I said, well, what if I add my app name to the end of it? And that's what it needed. You still need to specify your app. So if you don't have a migrations folder, you just need to create the migrations folder and an it.py file, and then type make migrations, and it'll find it, or specify the app, and it'll create that folder for you. So that time when I ran my migration, it ran it, and it also faked it. I didn't need to. You don't need the fake flag anymore. So I was kind of surprised and impressed by that. And so I made a change to the model. I removed a field. I typed make migrations, and then I typed migrate, and that was it. No flags, no specifying the app or anything. It finds it all for you, just 2 simple commands. So I was a little skeptical at first, but it worked. All right, so I wanted to add another model, basically. So here's just another example of adding a model. I added a many-to-many field. Again, 2 simple commands, and that's all there was. Just to make migrations and a migrate, and everything else is done automatically. So, and this is what the migration file looks like. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the migration file South creates, but it's huge and kind of ugly. But basically, I don't know if you can see this very well. It's got your dependencies. It's dependent on the previous migration, and then just commands to add these 2 fields that I added. So it's very simple, a lot easier to read and edit a migration file.
What about does it still have the entire model definition log?
No.
It doesn't.
No.
So developer A can make a migration, developer B can make a migration, and won't come. Necessary.
Well, let me see.
As long as you're not changing things. Assuming you're not changing things. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, there's no, like, that's the whole file right there. There's nothing at the bottom. So you might have noticed on my last one, I did media types. I made it plural, so I just wanted to change the name to media type. So I renamed the class in my many-to-many field. And I thought, well, let's see how it handles this. I ran a make migration, and you'll see here that in yellow, it recognized the name change. It says, do you want to rename this field? I said yes. It renamed it, created the migration, and I typed migrate. You don't have to go in and edit your South migration to say, no, I'm not trying to delete one and create a new one. It just knows, it does it automatically. So I wasn't even expecting that. It was just like a bonus feature. Okay, there's this new command called squash. So sometimes you get into a project and you start making a whole bunch of migrations. When you first getting started, everybody's creating migrations. You have these huge migration files. And so there's this command called squash migrations. And you give it an app name and the version that you want to squash back to. Well, I only had 4, so yeah, you could say start, squash from 2 back or whatever.
What about from 2 to 6?
I don't think you can specify 2 different. I don't think you can specify a range. But I tried this and I wasn't impressed. So this was like, I don't know if you can see this code very well, but it didn't have any dependencies on it. And so I had to add this dependency, and then when I tried to run it, it still didn't run because it didn't catch my model renaming migration. So I don't think it's really ready for prime time. It's a lot easier. If you're just going to squash everything back to the beginning, just delete all your migration files and recreate them. It's a lot simpler, and I think you'll get a lot farther. So yeah, not quite ready for prime time. And I think on the docs he says, if you have issues, send or submit a ticket for him, because I think he's still kind of working out the bugs on that. So data migrations. So here on my model, I noticed that as soon as I got into it, I was like, what was I thinking? Only one person, if I have multiple movies, only one person can own one movie. So I decided to do a data migration where I made the user a many-to-many field. So here's my model change. It's still a 3-step process for a data migration. You want to make the schema change first. And so here I'm adding users as a many-to-many field. And I just had to change the related name for the one-to-many field for the user. And then I ran the make migrations and migrate. No problems there. So to create the data migration, this is your command. Manage.py, make migrations, empty, and then the app name. Pass in an empty flag with the app name. And this is basically what it creates for you. And it's just an empty migration file where you can fill in the rest. And so this was my migration. Basically, I create this function here, user to M. I get the movie model. And then for each movie in that movie model, I'm just going to add that user to the many-to-many field. And so the only thing I'm adding is that function and then this operation down here to run that function. And that's it. You run the migrate, and it worked, no problems. And then the last step of a data migration is to make another schema migration, where basically I just pulled out the old field, the foreign key, ran make migrations and migrate, and that was it. So pretty straightforward. Nothing too new there. Okay, the last thing I tried was upgrading from south. So when you upgrade from south, basically you just make sure that any of your installs are all up to date with the latest migrations. And then you delete all your numbered migration files and just leave the folders in init.py. And so there's 3 simple commands. So this first command here is just deleting all the migrations file, and then it's your 2 commands that you've seen throughout this talk, make migrations and migrate. And that's it. If you have circular imports, you're going to have to do the fake dance, kind of like with South. If you have circular migrations, you have to create some first and then fake it and then make migrations again. But if there's no circular import or anything like that, it just works. So, like I said, it was pretty short. Once I got into it, there wasn't much to it for. It wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. So, yeah, Greg?
Yeah, so how does it work with, like, do you know if there's any tools for, like, large table migrating, like 10 million records, and you want to, or even, like, production database type thing, you don't want to go down. I know South is really just, when it adds an index, it just does create index, it swaps the table, and it doesn't do whatever it is. Yeah, you know that, yeah, you know that. South is really messing with the production database. I don't know if they fixed that or there's options for like this really large tables and change things up.
I haven't gone down that rabbit hole. Like, the biggest table I had is part of my envelope budget system, and I didn't even try to run that one yet. I was going to, but I ran out of time. But I don't even think there's any circular imports in that. It's like, yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, I guess the best thing is just if you have just try it and see what happens. When I found it was pretty easy to recover from errors. Any other questions? I know that was really short. Yeah, so the migrations create these migration files which you put, in Git or whatever you're managing your files in. And so if you're reverting code and you want to go back, it's best to, you can run a reverse migration. So when you run the migrate command, you specify the app and the version. So like manage.py migrate 002 to roll back to migration 2, and then you would roll back to your Git reversion to go back to that point in time. So it manages your reverse migrations as well. I don't know if that answered your question. So that's about it. I have made a little progress on my movie tracker, but not a whole lot. I can add movies now, but I haven't put it into, haven't created my media types and where they're stored. So. Sorry? Yeah. And I think they're on release candidate 2 right now, so it should be weeks, a week or two before it's out. All right, anything else you guys want to talk about?
Share.
All right. What's that? Yeah, I've never used Java. If you want, I could show you my movie project. If anybody's interested, they could help me build it out. It's actually more of an Angular app with a Django API. PyCharm is the best Python editor ever that Greg introduced me to. PyCharm? Sorry? Yeah, where's my video.com? Yeah. I'll probably put it on DigitalOcean. Yeah, they're cheap droplets. And I like Django. Well, I've got probably 5 years of experience in Django, and a lot of it could be overkill for a lot of things. But I found that anytime I start a small project that I think it could be overkill, it grows, and then I'm glad I use it. There's a lot of third-party extensions that you can just plug in. And so for this one, I've got the Django REST framework in there, and then I've got like a REST auth plugin and a few different plugins that just makes things easier. So I can show you my requirements file. There's also debugging built in, testing built in.
I'm not familiar with Django at all.
And there's nice, you can use IPython and IPython notebook to like just test and debug with it. So these are the packages that I have right now. So it's mainly just the REST framework and then registration. And so it was very quick to just throw it together, build an API. I was going to build it in Django, but I like to buy themes from Themeforest. And so the theme that I bought was an Angular app. I didn't realize it until after I bought it. I'm like, well, I'll just build it in Angular then. Yeah, so because I'm working with an Angular app and I'm running that through Node, it didn't like that I was on 2 different ports, even though I was on localhost. So I just added this CORS header, and then in my settings, I basically just said, you know, in my development environment for now, I just had this disable. I added this CORS middleware, and then just told it to allow all origins on my dev environment. And I turned off the CSRF just for dev. AngularJS mainly. So this is it so far. Basically, this is a list of my videos that I've added. If you want to add a video, search here. So,
how are we going to add that? Manually?
well, you just. Well, I probably only have hundreds, not thousands. So yeah. Yeah. So this search here, when I click on Add Movies, I just do a search for a name, and if I click this Add button, it basically just adds it to my list on my account, and then I can see the list over here. What's that?
Manually enter right my Plex library in couple of cells.
Your what library?
I mean my Plex library.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah. Well.
Couple of cells.
That's why I'm making it open source, so you can add a feature to import your Plex library.
or you can do a library.
Yeah. You could create an iPhone app and scan all your barcodes on your DVDs if you want. Yeah, there's not much to it here. It took me a while to figure out user authentication in Angular. I've never done that before, so that was kind of my biggest project because this is all a one-page app basically with Angular. So there's no page reloads.
You keep local table users and local database, or you're going to.
No, it's all through the API, so everything goes through Django. So when I log in, it hits the Django REST API and authenticates the username and password
Against what?
against the Django database. I'm using SQLite for development.
Okay, so it's all.
Yeah, once I go live, I'll use Postgres.
Nowadays, all keys plays with Google account.
Yeah, and that's another thing. A bonus feature of using Django is they've got plugins for all that.
They do?
Yeah, for social authorization.
So then how do you do the authentication? You just display the login page, throws it over to Django to the API.
Yeah.
It goes back to token.
Yeah, so I'm using this, where was it?
Using the loss or using
I'm just using the,
the REST framework?
so I have this REST auth plugin, and it uses the REST framework token auth. So once I authenticate with username and password, it sends me back a token, and then I just send that through my header. Yeah.
Does it also create like the session ID and all that? Create sessions on the back end?
For my sessions, let me pull that up. Angular has, hold on, let me pull it up. They have this window.session storage. And so when I log in here, yeah. Yeah, if you go to GitHub/DJedi, and just where's my video? Yeah. Yeah, there's no external packages.
So managed PY, it's a part of Django.
Sorry?
Managed PY program that you
Yeah. Yeah, when you install Django, all your management commands run manage.py. Yeah, it has this concept of session storage. The Angular can work with different browsers to store sessions, and that's where I'm putting everything. Yes, Angular is the greatest thing since Django. Yeah, so this token, once it gets stored, I've got this auth interceptor factory that basically puts this header, if it finds a header, it just throws that in as my request header whenever I make a request.
I'm like a solely backend, so give us a little bit of BCD, how copy scripts and how JS and all that works. I've heard a lot about it, but
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm fine. It's okay. So let me give you a little background with JavaScript. That's probably like the first programming language I ever learned, and I realized really quick I couldn't do much with it. And then I had to start learning a back-end language like ASP, classic ASP, then PHP. But it was helpful that I learned JavaScript first, and I took it as far as I could, and then I could find ways to help make things faster. But it seemed like back then you try to avoid using JavaScript because it was so slow and it was like noticeably running on your browser. So I'm kind of surprised at how it's kind of taken over. Now you can build full-scale apps in JavaScript. And so I got into Angular just because I went to Open West and like it seemed like every talk was on Angular. So I thought, well, I'll try it in my next project. So my last company, JobDash, we just kind of plugged it in with Django. It wasn't a full one-page Angular app, but on each page that we wanted kind of one-page functionality, we just put it at the bottom of our template file, and it worked out really well. And just you kind of have to think different than jQuery. It's kind of a mindset shift, but once you get used to it, you'll never.
jQuery, or it's completely on its own?
It's got like a mini jQuery in it. If you include the jQuery library, it'll use that instead. So you can use all the jQuery selectors inside of Angular out of the box.
And is it like, does it have the whole CSS framework and stuff with it? Or do you like bootstrap it?
See this, so I've never done CoffeeScript until a couple days ago when I bought this framework, and it was using CoffeeScript and Angular and Bower, Grunt. I've used Bower before. I've never used Grunt in the past. And so I just started learning it all just to use this template, basically. So CoffeeScript I've always tried to avoid, but it turns out it's pretty easy and pretty similar to JavaScript, but it's more like writing JavaScript with Python syntax. So I like it. So yeah, this is all CoffeeScript here. I don't know, it reads pretty much like JavaScript. Instead of typing function, you just put in your parameters for the function and this little arrow, and you don't need the little brackets, kind of like Python. I guess the beauty of Angular is all your code lives inside of your HTML. So if you want to like show and hide different elements, you have all these ng dash tags, like ng if. You know, if this variable is true, then I'm going to display this DOM element, or show or hide or whatever. So, and then it just kind of like watches all your variables. So if you change a scope variable, the DOM changes automatically. There's no.
Kind of like Knockout.
Yeah.
Knockout, I don't know if anybody else has Knockout. Knockout has so many issues, like it's a variable, it's not in there. Just like everything stops. Does that kind of happen to this too?
Yeah, so I just started learning Knockout this month because that's what I'm using at my current job. That's just what they used. But I think anything going forward will use Angular just because it's so much more robust. But yeah, if you know Knockout, you get the concept of what's that?
You said you bought some framework. Angular is free. What did you buy?
Oh, I bought a theme. So on Themeforest. Whenever I start a new project, I don't like to do the front end work, so I just go here and find an HTML theme, generally in the admin. And so I bought one called Simplify.
Oh, you mean set of CSS?
Yeah, so you can browse through these themes and then preview them. And so this is the theme that I purchased. And so it's got all these examples of how to create different elements in your site. And so that's kind of, I just use this template as a starting point. Django pretty much I found integrates with everything as far as front end goes. I haven't had a problem integrating. But like with this app, because it's all Angular, a one-page app, it just made sense to use Django as an API backend. So I don't know how far you want me to go down. Did you want to see some simple Angular demos?
Yeah, I mean, how does Angular work?
I'd like to see it interact with like a Django, simple Django.
Yeah.
Have it like target something that is sense. Like
example off the top of my head. Okay, so here's an example of, this is my envelope budgeting system. So this is kind of how I combine a Django template with Angular. So this is my pending transactions view. So envelope budget, the way it works is it connects to your bank, and you can you click this download button. It connects to your bank, brings in all your transactions, and then you can go through your transactions and edit them. So if I wanted to say whatever I bought at Amazon, I wanted to change the memo on this. So that's where right there I clicked it, I edited it, and it sent it back up to the server and saved it. So let me open up my inspector here. Let's see what's going on. What was that? Oh, yeah, they're Chrome plugins. Knockout.js is kind of useless. But Angular has this other one here where you can see all the scopes of your Angular app, which is pretty handy, so you can see it's kind of handy to debug and see what is going on in the background. So here's my template file. At the bottom, I generally add all my scripts. So this one's kind of a big one. But let me find the editing script. JavaScript?
Just the way that they format it.
Oh,
jQuery.
yeah.
Just like a function within a function, essentially.
Yeah. Your functions are objects. And
Yeah.
yeah. So in Angular, you have controllers, and basically like on a certain page, you generally have one controller per page. You might have a main app controller. For this one, I have the transaction controller, so it has basically everything to do with this page is in this controller. I was going to show that in-place editing feature, but that's actually an Angular plugin. Angular has a lot of plugins like Django, so I've got this in-place editor plugin. Let me find where that is. Okay, so here's my it does. There's a Webstorm is kind of like, there's a guy that made a bunch of Angular tutorial videos. It's egghead.io, and he uses Webstorm. And I think IntelliJ or JetBrains has kind of sponsored him, and they do a lot of work to integrate, make sure it works well. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, Webstorm's pretty much like PyCharm for JavaScript, but it works well inside of PyCharm as well. So here's how you do I guess a for loop inside of Angular. So I've got this table row tag, then I have this ng repeat, and I do t in transactions. So my scope.transactions contains all my transaction files, and then it just loops through and outputs all this information here. So here's my memo button, and so I just add this editable text equals t.memo, and so my t.memo contains what I imported. And then on after save, it runs this update transaction and passes in the transaction object itself. I don't know if you guys can even see this. Can you guys see it okay? Or do you want me to blow it up? So this function to update the transactions, it's got this HTTP injector. I'm not very good with the names of Angular stuff. Angular has these, I don't know what this HTTP would. Someone who's here familiar with Django or Angular?
Seems like a job.
I can't remember what this is called. Basically, HTTP post is kind of like your AJAX, yeah, your dot post in jQuery, but it returns a promise. And so on success, I'm basically applying. Yeah. So like the jQuery one has a callback for your post. With Angular, you use promises, which you don't get into that big callback loop that you see a lot with jQuery. And there's been whole talks at OpenWest. There's a really good talk on promises and why they're useful. And it was, oh, what's his name? He's really into ham radios. Hamstudy.com or hamstudy.org. What's his name? Oh. What's that? He had one about Angular. Richard Bateman. Yeah, he gave a good talk about promises, and he also gave a good talk about Angular. So if you go to OpenWest and find those two talks, he had some really good talks there. I don't know where I'm at. So yeah, basically, I make this post, and the URL. This is basically a Django view that I plugged in there. So that's where I'm posting to, sending in a transaction object. So if I go to that update transaction view, you can basically see where I'm taking the transaction object and applying it, and then I'm sending back the new transaction object. I don't know if that's a good example of what you're looking for. It's kind of hard on the fly. Find something useful that makes sense.
I was thinking maybe this
Oh, really?
I guess that's me.
I could try.
Mostly I was just thinking like right level Django app that has one view that basically just submits it to the next thing, push it over. It takes too long. Just figure it out myself.
So what were your requirements, Ken?
Like I said, cat's name. Put the cat's name in the field, hit submit. You have like a button. Hit that. See the cat's name. Or update it.
Okay.
I don't really care. And then basically you have on the Django side, you have a single view that has cat's name. Just so I can see the action. That's all I care. I'm sure you can do some.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of. There is some setup involved to. Like I would need to build